Well, folks, we have crossed that 1 million subscriber milestone, but rest assured, we are not slowing down. So if you're not already, please do subscribe and make sure to like, share, and comment on the videos. And now, back to today's video. As you all know, France has been pushing hard for EU strategic autonomy. They want to reduce their dependence on the United States for security and defense. And in order to do so, they've been investing heavily in their own defense capabilities. We've seen this with the recent announcement of the Scorpion Future Combat System, which is basically the French equivalent of the American Future Combat System. Or the fact that France is developing a new generation of nuclear weapons, which will increase their nuclear arsenal by 50%. But France's efforts to achieve strategic autonomy go beyond just defense and security. It also extends to foreign policy and international relations. In fact, Emmanuel Macron has made it clear that he wants to create an independent EU foreign policy that is separate from US dominance. This is something that he has been advocating for years now, and it really came to the forefront during his recent visit to China in May 2022. During his visit, Macron gave a speech in which he outlined his vision for an autonomous Europe. He said that Europe needs to be able to act independently on the world stage and not just be a sidekick to the United States. He specifically criticized the tendency of European nations to align themselves too closely with Washington, and said that Europe needs to find its own balance between China and the US. Now, this isn't the first time that Macron has called for an autonomous Europe. He has been advocating for this for years now, but the rhetoric is becoming more and more heated. And it's clear that Macron is becoming increasingly frustrated with what he sees as a lack of independence among European nations. In fact, during his visit to China, Macron was actually joined by the leaders of 5 other European nations, namely Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Spain. And he used this opportunity to push for a joint European approach to China. Now, not all of these countries are as keen on decoupling from the US, as France and Germany, for example, still rely heavily on American gas. But nonetheless, Macron is trying to build a coalition of like-minded countries in order to push forward his agenda. Now, there are a number of reasons why Macron wants to create an autonomous Europe. The main one being that he believes that it is in the best interest of Europe as a whole. He argues that Europe needs to be able to stand up for itself on the world stage and not just be a sidekick to the United States. Additionally, Macron is also keen on developing closer ties with China. He sees China as a major player on the world stage, and he wants Europe to be able to engage with China on an equal footing. Now, it's not all just rhetoric. France has already started to take steps to create an autonomous Europe. For example, France is currently leading the development of the European Sky Shield, which is a joint European air defense system that will protect against threats from Russia. Additionally, France is also working with Germany and other European nations to develop the Future Combat System, or FCS. As I mentioned earlier, this is basically the European equivalent of the American Future Combat System. And it is a joint program that is being funded by France, Germany, Spain, Italy, and Belgium. Now, while these are all big steps forward, it is worth noting that Europe is still far from achieving strategic autonomy. The EU as a whole still relies heavily on the United States for security and defense. And even individual European nations like Germany and the Netherlands still rely on the US for military support. Nonetheless, Macron's efforts are laying the groundwork for what could be a major shift in European foreign policy. It remains to be seen how other European nations will respond to Macron's call for an autonomous Europe. But one thing is for sure, Macron is making an independent EU foreign policy a top priority. So what do you guys think? Is Macron's vision for an independent EU foreign policy realistic? And do you think that other European nations will come around to his way of thinking? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.